You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Eben Janssen. Newsroom is streaming live on YouTube as we speak and will do so for the next hour. The entire show can also be watched on demand on our YouTube channel all of the time. Today we look ahead to next week when South Africa will go to the polls once again. We'll look at opinion polls and social media trends, and then what our born frees will be doing next week a little bit later in the show. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines. The Electoral Court is due to hold an inquiry today into an application seeking the resignation of IEC chairperson Phansi Tlakula. The court sitting in the High Court in Johannesburg postponed the matter on Tuesday to give Tlakula time to file a responding affidavit. Opposition parties want Tlakula to resign before the May 7 national elections. They argue her integrity has been compromised. This follows a forensic investigation by Treasury and report by the Public Protector into Tlakula's role in the procurement of the IEC's premises in Centurion outside of Pretoria. President Jacob Zuma addressed the main Workers' Day event in Polokwane. Unity among Tripartite Alliance members and within COSATU remained a key point of discussion. President Zuma said the ANC's intervention in the Labour Federation's internal squabbles was to ensure unity. Events to mark May Day were also held across the country. And Malaysia has released the much-anticipated report on flight MH370 that chronicles its slow response to the airliner's disappearance. It does not, however, contain new clues on what happened to the missing plane. The brief report, which has been submitted to the International Civil Aviation Organization, is mostly a recap of information that has already been released. The plane vanished en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing with 239 souls on board. Now, in less than a week, South Africa will be heading to the polls for the 5th time in our 20 years of democratic freedom. In the run-up to the elections, several respected academics have said that they don't believe the upcoming elections will set South Africa on a radically different political path to what it's on now. A total of 8,651 candidates from 45 political parties are standing for the general elections. Earlier this week, we spoke to former DA leader Tony Leon about what he thinks about party leadership. Let's have a look back at what he said.
And the question for the opposition, and the DA is incontestably the principal opposition party, is what are we going to do over the next 5 years, not just to put ourselves in a stronger position electorally, but to make our message not just appealing, but coherent and contrasting to the narrative that's coming from the governing party. Because I think if there isn't clear blue water between the ruling party and its principal opposition, then one's got to say it's just a choice between personalities rather than a difference of, significant party programs. And if and I'm not there, so I'm preaching from the outside, if I were in the DA leadership, I would spend a lot more time thinking about the messaging and the program rather than, if we have leader X or leader Y, because I think our own history in South Africa has proven that it's not just about the person at the top, although that is important. It's also about the program underneath that person that will determine the success or the failure of the party or indeed the country.
Wanted to ask. That was a little bit earlier this week. In studio today, we're joined by political analyst Stephen Friedman, the director of the Centre for the Study of Democracy at Rhodes University and the University of Johannesburg. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Prof, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
Prof, how is leadership different in South Africa today?
Well, I think that we obsess too much about leadership in South Africa. I think that we still believe that one day the great man will come back and save us all. And I think, therefore, we worry too much about leaders in this country. I think that it's been unfortunate that the election campaign has had very little to say about the future of this country. It's had a great deal to say about what the opposition thinks of the president and what the governing party thinks of the opposition. But if you look back on this election campaign and you look at how much was said in this election campaign about the issues which South Africans grapple with every day, it's not awfully much. And I think that's because our politics is far too obsessed with leaders.
Are you one of those academics that believe that this election won't see anything radically different happen afterwards? It'll be more of the same?
Well, it depends what you mean. I mean, is this going to be an election in which we're going to have massive shifts at the polls? No. Why do I say no? Well, let's use a bit of common sense. The leader of the opposition, Helen Zille, has said publicly that she expects the African National Congress to get 60% of the vote. Yeah. Well, in South Africa, political parties don't talk down their own prospects, they talk up their own prospects. And I think that we can be fairly confident that if Ms. Zille thinks that the ANC is going to get 60%, that it will get 60% or more. And that means that we will have only small shifts. Yeah. On the other hand, this probably will be the most hard-fought and the most competitive election in the history of the country. And it may indicate that we're heading for more competitive elections in the future.
And how do you, where you're standing now, how do you see the sort of picture panning out next week? One hates to talk about percentages, but what about new entrances? There we see Julius Malema, for instance, on screen now. How do you expect them to go?
Well, you see, that's been hyped up beyond recognition. I mean, if you just do the math, if you assume that the ANC is going to get about 60, if you assume that the DA got 23% in the last local elections, it's unlikely to do worse. You're already dealing with 85% of the votes. There are a whole lot of small parties packed into that. So, you know, once you've done the math, the idea that they're going to win more than Cope won last election is highly unlikely. So they will be represented in Parliament. They will get a few percentage points. But I think if you do the math, they're unlikely to outperform Cope last time.
If there are any surprises in the offing next week, where do you see those kind of surprises happening at the polls? Could it be somewhere like the Western Cape where people are talking that the ANC are really in with a good chance of unseating the DA, and that the people in the Western Cape, especially the poor and the working class people, are not very happy with what's been happening in the last decade under DA rule in the Western Cape?
I think that, look, let me just say, I think the prospects in the Western Cape of the DA losing the Western Cape are very slim. I think it's very unlikely. The people who are unhappy in the Western Cape are the people who vote for the ANC, who will vote for the ANC again. I think if you're asking about surprises, I'm interested in one aspect, and it's not a regional thing at all, and that is that there are clearly a sizable number of ANC voters who are unhappy, and we've seen this reflected in public. Yeah. Now, what we've seen in previous elections is that ANC voters are unhappy 4 weeks before the election or around then, land up voting ANC on the day. Now, will that be the same this time? We don't know. And I think we don't know because those voters don't know. I think there are more people in this election making up their minds at the last minute than ever before, and that may provide some surprises when the votes are counted.
What about Gauteng, for instance, the frontier province, they call it, for this election? Do you see any shifts happening here? And what about the whole e-toll question and that's sort of been played out in the media also?
Well, I think, first of all, one needs to bear in mind that in Gauteng, in the last national election, the ANC won 64% of the vote. So really, you're talking about a massive ANC meltdown in Gauteng if they're going to be deprived of a majority. I think that's unlikely. The ANC will lose votes in Gauteng, there's no doubt about that. But when you're talking about dropping 15 percentage points, that's huge, and I think it's unlikely. I think the e-toll question, people need to bear in mind that millions of South Africans in Gauteng are not affected by e-tolls because they travel on transport which is not tolled. So, you know, it's a big issue for people who own cars.
Middle class.
It's a big issue for middle class people, but when you count up the votes at the end of the day, most of the voters are not in the middle class.
Yeah. Do you think the opposition parties in general could have run a smarter election campaign? There have been some real mistakes by opposition parties being made in the run-up to it, in the months run-up to the election, the kind of mergers that we've seen with the Gang and the DA and the bad PR fallouts and alienating your constituency, some call it, with the land issue and so forth. What do you make of all of that?
Look, I think we always in election campaigns have parties making major mistakes. I think, for what it's worth, that the message the ANC has sent out for its voters is not the message that ANC voters want to hear. The ANC's been stressing how much it's done for voters. I think there's a problem that the ANC has of trust with voters. So you don't win back people's trust by saying, look, we did wonderful things for you. The DA obviously made a major error with the Mampela story. And I think Agang's prospects, whatever they were, have been virtually destroyed by that particular incident. So there have been major mistakes made, and I'm sure that they will make some difference at the end of the day. But ultimately, despite the fact that more people will be deciding at the last minute than ever before, most South Africans are quite fervent in their party loyalties. And therefore, I think you find at the end of the day that these mistakes on the campaign trail don't matter as much as we think they do.
Yeah, they're quite passionate. On a lighter note, I wanted to talk to you about some of the other parties that are on the roll, the Ubuntu Party, and why would you vote for these kinds of parties then?
Well, one's always puzzled why anybody votes for smaller parties because, well, I mean, certainly not. There are very important smaller parties in this country. I mean, if you take a party like the Freedom Front Plus or the ACDP or the UDM, these are parties which represent specific groups of South Africans, even if they're small groups. But one always wonders why these people try, because it takes a lot of money. In the end, South Africans are loyal to their parties. They're not particularly keen to vote for Ubuntu parties or KISS parties or parties which have some gimmick, etc. And I think the most interesting Democrat in this country is the leader of the KISS party, who comes back every election despite losing her deposit in the previous election. She certainly deserves marks for persistence. But obviously her experience shows that voters are interested in parties they can identify with, even if they're small parties, and some of these newcomers just don't crack it.
What about some of the other parties way out there, the Gayton McKenzie's, these kinds of guys? Well, what's the point, really, I think some people would ask?
Well, look, the name of the game, as I said, if you can find a niche, of people who really support you, you can get into Parliament. You know, Bantu Holomisa has the support of people in a particular area of the Eastern Cape, and that gets him repeatedly re-elected. I think the challenges to the Gayton McKenzie this world is who is it that you're actually appealing to? Who is, and I've debated this with him in public, he says it's coloured people in the Western Cape are upset about the way they're treated, but he's not the first person to have said that.
Coloured nationalism has played itself out for the last 20 years.
Well, Peter Marais tried this, various other people have tried it. All one can say is that we have had parties pushing that particular message in previous elections. They've all done very badly.
Professor, thank you very much. We could carry on for another half an hour, but unfortunately we've run out of time this morning. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
That's Professor Stephen Friedman joining us in studio this morning. Just to recap, Workers' Day was celebrated yesterday. The main event was held in Polokwane with an address by President Jacob Zuma.
Trade Alliance leaders arrived to a thunderous applause. Thousands of workers were bussed in from around the province.
This May Day comes at a time when the Workers' Federation, COSATU, is deeply divided. This has largely forced the leaders here to call for unity within the tripartite alliance. They also took this opportunity to rally the workers to vote in their numbers on May 7.
President Zuma told workers that a divided COSATU would undermine the gains made over the past 20 years.
Our intervention is frank, comradely, and honest. Our intervention has no intention to take sides. It has only one intention: to help COSATU unite.
COSATU's largest affiliate, NUMSA, has openly defied a call by its mother body to rally around the ruling party ahead of the May 7 poll.
The SACP is calling on the working class to close ranks in order to unite, to defend working class gains and to defend the unity of COSATU.
COSATU called on the ANC to ensure its call for a ban of labor brokers was heeded. It also wants decent jobs created.
All these demands that we hold, even if the ANC government was going to say, yes, COSATU, we are willing, come, let's do it, come, let's make it happen. It is not going to be possible as long as COSATU is not united.
And this is a challenge awaiting the Labour Federation after the election. Yodisa Njamela, SABC News, Polokwane.
Well, with the election now days away, we take a look at what the opinion polls are reflecting. Ipsos South Africa undertakes what they term Pulse of the People studies every 6 months. A randomly selected sample of South Africans of voting age are asked which party they would support on the national and provincial level if there were an election the next day. Respondents then fill in their own choices on a ballot paper, making this a secret vote. Since the 2009 elections, there have been developments that have the potential to change the South African landscape. The passing of Madiba is one, the so-called Born Free service delivery protests, Julius Malema breaking away from the ruling party, and other new political formations, the appearance of a new AMCU labour movement, and the power struggle within COSATU, to name some of the others. How have all these activities influenced the voting patterns and translate into real votes still remain to be seen. In 5 days, ordinary South Africans will have their say at the ballot box. Now, Marie Harris is a renowned and highly respected political analyst and is currently Ipsos Markino's Managing Executive Business Development and Public Affairs. That's a mouthful, Marie. Good morning.
It's quite a mouthful. We keep it at public affairs. That's fine.
Public affairs, is that?
Yeah.
That's where you keep that. That's very pleasant. Just tell us what your findings have been in the run-up to the election until now.
Well, as you said, we do these polls every 6 months, and it's very interesting to see how things change and shift and then settle down a few weeks before an election. We've just come out of fields with our first big poll of the year. We interviewed actually 3,730 people, randomly chosen, as you mentioned before. According to that, there were about 12% of South Africans who either refused to fill in their ballot paper that we gave them, or they said they don't know. So obviously one has to look at those guys and determine whether they're going to vote or not.
So South Africans, the 12% of South Africans that are non-compliant and difficult as it is.
Yeah, more or less. But that's not the end of the story, because remember, the studies we do are representative of the total South African market, you can say, or the total South Africans 18 years and older. But all of them are not going to vote. There are 35 million, give or take a few, of South Africans 18 years and older who are eligible to vote. Of those, only 25 odd million are registered to vote. So the trick is you have to ask them, are you registered to vote? And then see whether your figures comply with the IEC figures, which I'm happy to say, yes, we come out about 25 million.
What are the major issues that you guys are reading that are likely to influence the polls in 2014?
I do not think South African politics is necessarily driven by issues, but the most important issues that people bring up, if you ask them the question, what do you think the government who is going to be elected this year has to address? The issue of unemployment is mentioned by more than 80% of all South Africans. Issues of crime, corruption, development, and what was the fifth one? I think that poverty, yes. Those are the 5 issues mentioned. And then also, if you then ask them what's the most important issue, about 50% choose the unemployment and job creation as the most important issue.
If you look at the profile of the different political party supporters, has that profile changed at all over the last decade or so? What are you guys seeing?
The DA profile has changed somewhat. Currently, about a fifth of DA supporters are black, and that's 20%, and 80% of DA supporters are coming from the minority groups, whites, coloureds or Indians. If we look at the ANC, their profile has not changed that much. About 10 years ago, I would say they were 98% black, they're now 95% black. So clearly still a party for not making big inroads, some inroads, but not big inroads.
We're seeing some pictures now of the EFF running their campaign. What is their profile? What does it look like, and what's the outlook like?
It's very interesting, the EFF profile. Obviously, their profile is almost 100% black people. But the interesting thing is that they have a dichotomy within their party, if you look at their supporters. On the one side, unemployed people, young unemployed people. On the other side, workers, like the miners, where the AMCU, you mentioned AMCU earlier, where the AMCU supporters come in and so on. So a very interesting, almost two publics that Julius Malema has to take into account.
It's the first election that we will have without Nelson Mandela with us. The Madiba magic no longer there. Do we see this sort of play out in some way during this election or not?
No, not really. I thought actually that the ANC would use the Mandela legacy a lot more in their campaigning, which they didn't do. Their campaign was more driven around the good story to tell, and they did not use Madiba magic as I thought they would.
Well, thank you, Marie, for joining us. Marie Harris from Ipsos joining us today and giving us a little insight into what the polls are saying. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Eben.
Okay, let's take a quick look at what you are talking about on social media. Of course, don't forget, you can send it to @SABC Newsroom. That's where we live. Check your ballot paper is stamped at the back. Otherwise, it's not going to be counted. That's from Dan. Very, very interesting one there. Check that your ballot paper is stamped. Shahil says, we live in a world where people are more loyal to their political party than they are to their partner. Interesting. Sheresh, is it? Bhartia says, politicians need to stop throwing punches at each other and start talking about how they're going to implement policies. Well, we've had a lot of infighting and very little policies put on the table, really. Manzini Zungu says, election 2014, let's go out there, South Africa, and protect our freedom on the 7th. #ANC. Well, we just missed the picture of Mandela at the polls there, unfortunately. But let's take a look again what's on our Facebook page. It was not such a happy Workers' Day for all. Suspected car bomb exploded on the outskirts of Nigeria's capital, Abuja, yesterday, killing at least 15 people. We have more on that story on our page then, more on one of our headline stories today. Also on the page, the Electoral Court is due to hold an inquiry today into an application seeking the resignation of IEC chairperson Panzi Tlakula. More on that story and others on our Facebook page. Well, today on this election note, we have a look at the free at last speech former President Nelson Mandela made today, 20 years ago, announcing the ANC's victory. Let's take a look back at that speech.
In the life of our country, I stand before you filled with deep pride and joy. Pride in the ordinary, humble people of this country. You have shown such a calm, patient determination to reclaim this country as your own from the rooftops, free at last.
Yeah, we are free. Still, 20 years later, we are living Nelson Mandela's freedom, and we'll be forever grateful for that. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, well, we look at social media trends ahead of the election. Don't go away. This is Newsroom.
Jessica the hippo was found after she was washed down the river shortly after birth. Today, she is a large hippo and still returns for feeding and human interaction.
She also loves body exfoliating. She has a mask as well.
Jessica is the world's most famous hippo, and perhaps she's the only one who has forgotten how aggressive she's supposed to be.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
A very warm welcome to you at home. This is Afro Showbiz News, the show that brings you all things art and entertainment from around the African continent. Tunisian rapper Ben Ahmed, better known as Clay BBJ, has been released after spending 2 weeks in prison. The arrest came after he was accused of insulting security and violating public morals. The songs sung by the artists criticized the current situation in Tunisia. That's Afro Showbiz. Catch us every Saturday evening at 7:30.
Welcome back. You're in Newsroom here on SABC News. The 2014 elections is knocking on all of our doors with only days to go now. Political parties are doing everything they can in this final build-up to gain support. This time around, the elections open the doors to a variety of new and vigorous ways of election campaigning. The biggest game changer would have to be social media. Political parties have been out in full force on especially Twitter in the run-up to the elections. And joining us to tell us more about this is Mike Vronsky from Fuseware, who'll be monitoring the elections online. Good morning, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be on the show.
Social media, brand new in the South African context of electioneering. Just give us your views of what you guys have been seeing happening online and in the social media space.
Right. Well, social media has fundamentally transformed the way brands and people communicate. It's really had a knock-on effect on a global level, not just for South Africans. And especially in terms of these elections, we're seeing over 250,000 online conversations every single month about the political parties, about the leaders, people voicing their sentiment about anything. And I just find it amazing because, in 1994, the South African people got political freedom and indeed freedom of speech. And nothing exemplifies that more than social media, because now everybody can come online and they can say anything they want without fear of retribution.
In the age of self-obsession, your voice must be heard. Is that right?
Indeed. So social media does have a bit of an ego factor. It is about everyone wanting to have their voice heard. But it becomes a very important research tool and a marketing tool for brands like the political parties that want to understand what people care about, what are the issues. And social media provides that platform.
I think what people don't realize is that this is only the tip of the iceberg, really. Come the next election, 2019, we will have almost a social media election campaign. I would think it would change the game so much.
Well, I think social media has already changed the game for this election. And because it's so new, no election before this has ever had to deal with social media on this level, a lot of political parties aren't entirely sure how to actually go about doing this. Do they campaign? Do they spread marketing material? Do they engage with influencers? Do they engage with general public? They're still kind of sussing things out. So I think by the time 2019 comes here, we're going to have a whole lot more people online and connected, and they're going to want the political parties to be heavily involved in social.
And who've been the smart operators on social media in the run-up to this election?
Right. I can tell you who's winning in terms of share of voice, and that is hands down the ANC. They get over 60,000 conversations alone generated every single month. The downside to that, it is largely negative sentiment. The Twitter population aren't exactly in favor of the ANC, and it's largely in terms of the Holden Kundler thing. Interestingly enough, the DA is coming second and the EFF third in terms of raw conversational volumes. But if you look at the political party leaders, Zuma still takes the #1 spot, but Julius Malema is actually second, as opposed to the DA leader.
What about losing support on social media because of certain things that you've been involved in? Like, for instance, I think Helen Zille was pretty much leading the social media scenarios until a month or so back, and she started getting involved in fights with people in the social media space. Is that the kind of thing that can lose you support?
Absolutely. Social media is a double-edged sword. It gives you complete freedom of speech and a global audience, but at the same time, you have to be mindful and intelligent with the kind of content that you push out. If you don't want that content seen by everybody in the world on a giant billboard, do not post it. That's the #1 rule of social media. And I think political party leaders are still kind of getting to grips with that. But with that said, one of the key things on getting a lot of talkability on social media is to be the loudest person in the room. So, I mean, Julius Malema, for example, he's second only to President Zuma in terms of talkability. But, you know, he knows how to stir up a conversation, how to be sensational, and it's working for him.
Do you have to cop some abuse on social media in order to generate the numbers? And do you almost have to work with a bit of reverse psychology at times in order to get the traction?
Right. Well, if you look at the content being shared around the political parties, I think the EFF, for example, is creating a brand around the really key issues. You know, they're addressing poverty, they're addressing things like the unions, the labor unions, and the people are rallying around that. They've got a large amount of very targeted, very influential people that are joining in on the conversation. In terms of raw number of influencers, the ANC still wins there. You know, the ANC in terms of online traction gets the
vote, as it were, at the moment. And what about the Born Frees? Quickly, I'm talking about them a little bit later in the show. But what are they doing on social media?
Right. So the Born Frees, aka Generation Z, right? Those born after 1994, they are the connected few, basically. They've grown up with technology, they've grown up with the internet, and they're not afraid to go out there.
The early adopters.
They are the early adopters, and they aren't afraid to use technology on many devices to actually voice their opinion. So the way South African youth are consuming information has radically changed in the last couple of years. They're not afraid to go online to research, to educate themselves, as opposed to just believe in mainstream media that has been pushed out in the past.
Michael, thank you for joining us this morning. Very interesting insights. I'm sure we'll talk to each other again shortly before or after the election finishes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
From Fuseware, that was Michael Vronsky giving us the social media insights into how the campaign has gone and, of course, the last couple of days, what people are doing. Let's have another look at what's happening or what you're talking about on social media. Farida Khan says, just hope IEC's Tlakula doesn't come up with a technical or procedural reason to end the opposition's legal attempt to remove her. That one from Farida van der Kaap, it says. Richard Koza says, although I don't trust this P. Tlakula woman and IEC, I just hope we have a fair election. We've had a free and fair election every time we've gone to the polls. This is South Africa. Andrew Pike says, IEC lurches from one outrage to the next. Instead of suspending Tlakula for corruption, they rather pay her legal fees. Cronies, he says. Verbatim says, opposition parties, please boycott the elections if Tlakula doesn't want to step down. Do it for us, the voters. Those are just some of the comments coming in, some of your comments coming. We love it. Send it to @SABC Newsroom on Twitter, and we'll put it up if it's good enough. Makes sense. Now, the eyes of the world were on South Africa 20 years ago when Nelson Mandela, after spending 27 years as a political prisoner, was sworn in as South Africa's first black president. Let's have a look at how the world reported on that day. Bill Whittaker from CBS News filed this report on the 10th of May, 1994.
Both Nelson Mandela and South Africa had traveled a long way to get to this moment. More than 300 years of white domination ended for good with the swearing in of Nelson Mandela as this African nation's first black president.
So help me God.
He was the most famous opponent of the brutal racist system of apartheid, imprisoned 27 years. Today, Mandela paid tribute to his new vice president, F.W. de Klerk, the last apartheid president who negotiated the historic transfer of power. Mandela then called for unity in this racially diverse and racially divided land.
The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us.
This was something few people ever had expected to see, a peaceful transition after years of bloody racial strife. Hundreds of dignitaries from around the world came to witness history, to see the South African military, which once had enforced apartheid, fly overhead in tribute to Nelson Mandela, trailing the colors of the new South African flag.
Yeah, it was the best of times in the history of our country. Now, 20 years ago, we go to the polls next week. That story was reported on the 10th of May, 1994. Newsroom will take a short break. When we come back, we talk about the Born Frees.
That's Sports Live, daily at 8:30 p.m. on SABC News. Zoom into Africa. This is Seychelles. The president is Mr. James Michel James. Seychelles got independent from United Kingdom on 29 June in 1976. The population is over 80,000 people. One of the major languages spoken is English. Monetary unit is the Seychelles rupee.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
The Electoral Court is due to hold an inquiry today into an application seeking the resignation of IEC Chairperson Panzi Tlakula. The court, sitting in the High Court in Johannesburg, postponed the matter on Tuesday to give Tlakula time to file a responding affidavit. Opposition parties want Tlakula to resign before the May 7 national elections. President Jacob Zuma addressed the main Workers' Day event in Polokwane. Unity among the tripartite alliance members and within COSATU remained a key point of discussion. President Zuma said the ANC's intervention in the Labour Federation's internal squabbles was to ensure unity. Events to mark May Day were held across the country. And Malaysia has released a much-anticipated report on flight MH370 that chronicles its slow response to the airliner's disappearance. It does not, however, contain new clues on what happened to the missing plane. The brief report, which has been submitted to the International Civil Aviation Organization, is mostly a recap of information that has already been released. The plane vanished en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing with 239 souls on board. Now, with more than 600,000 born frees will be voting in the upcoming general election, youth organizations like Inkulu Vryheid made it their mission to encourage youth participation during the voting period. Through hosting different events across the country, the organization assists the youth in deciding who their political leaders will be. Now, to tell us more about the movement is the managing director of Inkulu Vryheid, Eric de Ridder, who's with us in studio. Good morning, Eric.
Morning, Evan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always nice to have you, Eric. I want to talk, before we go into the technicalities, I want to talk about Inkulu Vryheid and just tell us about the organisation and how you guys have come about it and the kind of events that you've been running.
Sure. Inkulu Vryheid it's a non-partisan youth organisation. Youth-led organisation is a big difference.
Yeah.
We launched it in February of last year. And since June of last year, we've running our Vote Our Voice campaign, which has been a non-partisan campaign aimed at voter education. We built a website summarizing the policies of the different parties, but we've also been hosting soapbox events on the ground, and also organizing other engagements to really bring young people closer to their leadership and encourage critical engagement across the board.
And the events itself, how's it gone? I mean, you've had quite a few in recent times. How are the events gone and the response from the youth?
The events have gone very well themselves. The organisation is driven by volunteers who opt in to deliver on these different engagements.
Yeah.
In the past week, we've had a very successful engagement with Advocate Vusi Pakoli in Port Elizabeth, where the dominant sentiment amongst young people was that voting is very important in this election, and some of the big issues, obviously, as always, inequality and unemployment. On Freedom Day, we had a big soapbox rally in Diepsloot. The dominant issues there were violence against women and children, as well as inequality and unemployment. We also had a big event in Stellenbosch on Freedom Day, and on Wednesday this week we hosted the real debate between Advocate Dali Mpofu, David Makura, and Mr. Musi Maimane.
How politically conscious and involved are the born free generation in South Africa?
I think more than they're often given credit for. We've encouraged people to exercise their democratic rights in this election, which involves either abstaining deliberately, either spoiling their ballots deliberately or participating actively. We've heard across the board sentiments in each of those different directions, very articulate views as to why they shouldn't participate or why they should participate. So I think that they are very, very active, and I think they're prepared, for the most part, to lead the country by expressing their desire for the future that they want to see in this election.
And what are they passionate about? What are the issues that concerns them?
The biggest issues that come up consistently across the country continue to be inequality and unemployment. I think it's very clear that the bulk of young people are still excluded from the main economy and struggle to find employment. but also our education system isn't preparing them for the type of innovation and entrepreneurship required to get them into the mainstream economy. So the big issues is always, again, unemployment, inequality, violence against women and children, but also corruption, which is a big thing amongst the Born Frees.
How do they view South Africa? How do they view South Africa, this wonderful country we live in, things work, but with our history and the sort of context that they are born out of, what do they expect from South Africa in the next 20 years?
I think they're caught in a bit of a trap in some other way. I think many of them are angry and have reason to be angry.
Yeah.
And they kind of relate to two South Africans. One is the one that they believe in, the one that they associate with, and the one that they're very positive about.
Yeah.
And the other one is the one that's reflected in our politics. I think many young people see our politics as broken. They want to see politicians being more innovative, thinking about how to solve many of the different issues that we face. And I think many of them straddle between these two. If you ask them fundamentally, do they believe that the future of South Africa is bright, they would say yes. And they're keen to play a role in creating that bright future. If you ask them if they're optimistic about where our political leaders are taking us, I think you'd get a very different response.
Do you think that there'll be a high voter turnout amongst them next week?
Well, as we've seen with voter registration, it's quite low in the 18 to 19 and 19 to 24 categories. But I think that that's not the only mode of expression. I think that my generation has different outlets. It finds different ways of airing its views and different ways of bringing about the future that they want. And I think there's a balance between young people saying, I want to help create the future that I want to see on my own. I don't want to deal with the politicians. And there's the other people who say political expression is really the key to that future. So I think it's a straddle between those.
Well, Eric, thank you for joining us today. We could carry on with this really riveting conversation for quite a bit. It's really interesting to find out what the youth are thinking and you know, the range of emotions that I think they go through with all the information that's available in this day and age. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Evan.
Brilliant. That is the Managing Director of Inkulu Vryheid, Eric de Ridder, who joined us here in the studio. Now, to end off this week, well, we're going to talk a little bit of sport. Now, the Sports Minister, Fikile Mbalula, has been very hard in recent times on transformation. Failure to transform could result in the maximum penalty of withdrawing national colours, according to the Minister. Then the unbeaten Money Mayweather, who briefly visited South Africa in January, well, he's not expected to struggle against WBA champion Marcos Maidana of Argentina this weekend. And to talk to us about this and other sport, Samantha Mari, as always. Hi, Samantha. Nice of you to join us again today. This whole transformation thing has gone down like a bit of a lead balloon, hasn't it?
Has, and I think it's always been in South African sport, but obviously the Minister feels that it's something that's necessary, it's something that needs to be done. If you look at the statistics, 84% of South Africa's population under 18 years old is black African. So looking at that, you know, it makes only, you know, business sense for people to buy into it and to invest in the youth of the country.
If you look at most of our national teams and even provincial teams, don't really reflect the demographics of our country, does it?
No, it doesn't. Not at all. I mean, when you look at who the majority is, and, you know, that's one of the stats that came out, the Eminent Persons Group, in their report, that certain sports have done the original quotas that were set out in 1994, you know, generic black 50%, and, you know, cricket, for example, has achieved that. But now we've got to take it a step further and, you know.
And what's been the response? You always see the officials and the minister making the speech and so forth. What's been the response from the federations? I'm sure that they're feeling the pinch a little bit.
I'm sure no one wants to be dictated to, and, you know, you don't really want to have, you know, numbers to follow. But according to what the minister said when we spoke to him on Tuesday, that, you know, there have been in the media comments that, you know, he's been slated over the 60-40, but he says that he's ready, he's prepared to listen to anyone who's you know, wants to speak about it, because, you know, he's open to
discussion,
having a discussion about it.
So it will be an ongoing discussion from here on forward, and hopefully a positive process.
Absolutely. The EPG still has to do a more substantial report on more sports and the transformation process in more federations. And yeah, he's open to speaking to the federations, but yeah, been very serious about what the penalties will be.
Let's move on to more important matters about the broken hearts of the Kaizer Chiefs supporters today. Let's talk about the league title.
Well, let's be realistic. They dropped the ball. You know,
they dropped the ball.
I think they were,
but I thought they won the league a month ago already.
Well, that's what they thought.
If I was listening to all the Chiefs supporters, they won the league at the end of March.
Indeed. There's still 2 matches to play. You never know what will happen. I mean, obviously, matches resume next week. Obviously, that big one. Then Chiefs' title hopes, you know, depend on Sundowns and SuperSport United.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But more importantly for them, I think this weekend is the Nedbank Challenge.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to come to next, the Nedbank Challenge. It's going to be a cracking weekend, isn't it?
It is going to be an absolute cracking weekend. And we've got Chiefs and Wits on the early match on Saturday. Chiefs also looking to kind of, you know, finish on a high. Still an outside chance of the league. But, yeah, Wits will host them at the Bidvest Wits Stadium. And then the second match, Pirates and Maritzburg United, I think that is also going to be quite an intense one.
Oh, it'll be very easy for Orlando Pirates. Buccaneers will waltz into the final as we do.
Well, I don't think it's going to be that easy. Maritzburg United have been an absolute revelation in this tournament. You know, they've won 5 of their 6 matches. Yeah. Steve Compella has just done wonders with his team.
No, Steve Compella is a fantastic coach and a credit to South African football.
Absolutely. Yeah, Pirates obviously looking to end on a high. I mean, they've been to 3 finals this season without, you know, so it's that search for some silverware.
Yeah, it's for search for some redemption, really.
Indeed.
If you had to ask the Pirates fans, it's been it could have been such a great season, but it turned out to be a long-suffering one in the end.
Well, you seem to laugh at Chiefs and Pirates together. Who are you supporting?
I support the Buccaneers.
Okay.
But you know, sometimes you have to take the rough with the smooth. That's why you always see me in black and white here at the workplace. Now, there's a bit of sevens rugby also.
Absolutely.
In the offing. Expectations, the South Africans very much in the hunt?
Very much in the hunt. I mean, must win this campaign. I mean, they're defending champions in Glasgow, so they're no stranger to what the pressures are there. They'll be without Captain Kyle Brown, but they've got a squad replacement for him, Sean Ardendorf, who will start on the bench. You know, they're just 7 points behind New Zealand, and this is the penultimate series, and we've got England to go. So they really have to have a good showing in the United Kingdom.
At least make the final, one would think.
Absolutely.
To have a chance of sort of upsetting New Zealand and winning the overall title.
Definitely. Well, also big on the rugby scene this weekend is Sharks are starting their overseas tour. It's their first, you know, match.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I think it's going to be a very long tour for the Sharks.
No, it will be, but, you know, realistically, they're the only South African team who could possibly win the title, log leaders. So they're playing the Rebels in Melbourne this morning.
So are we taking bets on Jake White being the national coach in 2015 after winning the title with the Sharks twice the next 2 years? Is that what we're saying?
We'll see.
Thank you, Samantha. Samantha Murray joining us as always on a Friday, telling us what's happening in the world of sport and what to expect. And today, a very nice contribution. Thank you for joining us, Samantha. Let's take a final look at what you are still passionate about, talking about on social media. Kanyisani says, Lomo says, it was a sad Workers' Day for residents of the highly populated Abuja town, Nyanya, as a bomb blast went off yesterday. Of course, we brought you that on our other platforms and news shows throughout the day. Lungile Shongwe says, elections 2014, I choose to use 5 years and not 20 as a measure on who I vote for. And I see red, he says. Stuart Grobela says, wow, this account is really busy all of a sudden at GCIS Media. He says, Stewie Max, he says, there we have a lovely photo that comes from Kasatu. At Kasatu today, he says, Workers Unite, vote ANC. That's from Kasatu. Kasatu has acknowledged all who celebrated Workers' Day and continues to appreciate the progress in 1994. And there we have a picture from Arrive Alive, CL, Stellenbosch. That's my hometown. That is unacceptable behavior in Stellenbosch, I tell you. Let us continue to seek ways to make transport safer for our workers. And having 100 workers on the back of a truck, that is medieval. 19th, 18th, 20th century. We're in the 21st century. We can't have this anymore. Please organise the appropriate transport for your workers. It's just not acceptable to put 100 people on the back of a truck and drive them into town to do their shopping. Come on, man. This is not 1980, it's 2014. That's where we wrap it, my little rant for today. This show was broadcast to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. You can watch edited highlights or the whole show on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You have been watching Newsroom, where we love it in the morning.